think the stage has been set for today's deliberations in a right fashion. The Ashta Siddhantas, what Anirban has put it very, very beautifully and unequivocally. From the theme note, architecting education for an emerging India, we move on to an emerging viewpoint, which is in today's economic parlances, the entire structuring of education, which was earlier a community-driven initiative, it has to become an enterprise of education. So the enterprise of education, the vision behind the values and vitality, I would invite Mr. Deeptiman Das, the Honorable CMD of EDSIL, to put forth his viewpoint on this particular topic. Sir.
Very good morning to you, distinguished co-panelists, organizers of Edu India, and distinguished guests. I think the stage has been set. My previous speaker spoke, very eloquently on the past and the backdrop in which the Indian education agenda was set, and very happy to take it from there. And being as he said, being a manager and a practitioner would take you to the next 50 years. So what agenda do we have, and what are the challenges and opportunities, and what lies ahead of us? Now let's start with the big backdrop. The big backdrop is that we want a double-digit progress, for the next 2 decades. That will help us to take about 300 to 400 million people out of the poverty, and that's what we are aiming at. If that's what we are aiming at, one of the bigger demand side problem as well as supply side problem would be addressed by education. Now, how much do we spend? We spend about 3.5%, and there's a big debate as to what countries of similar size are spending 5.5 to 6% and all that. That is one. Second is the outcome. The amount we spend, what outcome we get, how much of it we spend on salaries, how much of it is left for any innovation, and what innovation we can bring in. Now, if you have to talk about higher education, I think the 2 or 3, even in primary and school education, it is basically the access issue has been addressed, and we are stuck with quality issues. Access issue has been addressed to a great extent. Coming to higher education, I think there are 3 issues. One is access. GER is inadequate. We know that we are at about 23%, we would like to be at 40%, access has to go up. Second is quality. We all know about the quality. We know that it's a very diverse quality that we have. We have excellent institutions, we have just moderate institutions, and we have completely not so good institutions in terms of quality in higher education. Third is our employability focus, our alignment with the industry's requirements. That is the third thing that we are looking at. So what, in that context, very quickly, we have to look at what lies ahead of us. We are going to be a population of 1.5 billion. We're going to surpass China, and we are going to take a call as to it is going to be a demographic dividend or demographic disaster, and education is going to define whether it's going to be a demographic dividend or a demographic disaster. Demographic disaster, I'm sorry to say, that could mean are going the Russian way, or countries of similar sized countries cannot sustain unless they are backed by demographic dividend. My sense is that it is going to be demographic dividend. We have just started taking right decisions, and it's going to be a dividend. So how are you going to make it a dividend? And I'm happy that this forum is at least addressed the agenda, at least identified the agenda in the correct perspective. And some, as Prime Minister says, some not incremental but radical changes have to be brought about. We are all in agreement over that. And what are those radical changes? One is that we are education being looked at as an enterprise. I'm not going to go into the fact that it's going to be for profit, not for profit. Some of it is going to be not for profit, but where are we going to have PPP? Where are we going to have private enterprise? That's one aspect of the issue that we have to look at. GER, if it has to go up from 23 to 40, lot of investment has to come in. We are presently spending about 3 lakh crore. Center spends about 80,000 crore on education. States spend about 2.2. I am not adding the private sector spend which takes place. It may take you to 4 lakh crore or 4.5 lakh crore that we spend. Now, is the spend enough? Second, can the taxpayers afford more funds? Third is the outcome commensurate with the spend? One strong sense one gets is that government will have a limiting role to spend more, and hence there would be a lot of opportunity for private enterprises to come in and offer actually quality education of the kind that we find with ISBs and BITS that my previous speaker spoke about, and several other institutions which are coming up. And government will have an enabling role to guide them, not an inspectorial role. And some kind of ranking framework will make consumer decide in his own way. And some enabling ground should be made for quality institutions to further grow and dominate the market. This is one aspect of the story. Second is that which are the areas in which, as an enterprise, we think like an enterprise. That is something I thought I'll share with all of you. That which are the areas where without spending we can enhance the outcome. What is an enterprise? Enterprise is the way that we look at it from an outcome focus. Take for instance our state universities and central universities. Who are the stakeholders? Who decides? We have board of directors in companies. What is the board of governors' role? The Senate's role? How big is the Senate? How aligned are the Senates? How are the Senates selected? One is that how is the CEO selected? The Vice Chancellor, how is he selected? Just give you a small example of not private sector, which will be probably in the other end of the spectrum. Let's say public sector. How is the CEO selected in a public sector? There is an independent body which selects a public enterprises selection board, which selects the CEO and sends him there with a fixed tenure, with a fixed mandate. Every year a MOU is entered into between the public sector, setting the target for the year, and every year that MOU is reviewed, and there is some kind of incentive or disincentive built into the sector. This is something can we bring in as an enterprise, at least to higher education and gradually to the primary and secondary education in some way, having some agenda, some MOU. If you ask most of our central universities, what is your agenda for the year? What is your target for the year? Most probably there is none. This is one this thing. Well, if you ask that how is the Vice Chancellor selected, is there a body which selects them, an independent body consisting of this thing? This is another issue that we will have to address. So third is how is the governance done? Now is the Senate too big? Are there people specialized to in different fields to come into that? You have a board of directors in a public sector where it is ensured that people from different directions, from the related but eminent specialists of that same field are represented on the board. So this is something that as an enterprise we thought we should be looking at. And then gradually coming down, I thought that we could also focus on the role of technology in driving education for the next 50 years. We have a huge challenge of volumes. We have to make our system scalable. GER of 23%, 24% to 40% with quality intact is going to be a huge challenge. Now, can we have more colleges? Probably the answer is no. At least not from the government spend. From PPP, yes. From private sector, yes, to some extent. But technology is going to be a game changer, and I thought I would share some of the issues that we thought. So we talk about our higher education system being one of the largest in the world. It enrolls about 3.33 crore, 33 million students. 757 universities we know. We have a GER of 23.68. And we spend about $50 billion in terms of US. But our challenges, as I said, are accessibility, quality, and employability. Now, areas of application of ICT. Now, if scale is a challenge, scalability is a challenge, volume is a challenge, quality is a challenge, We are strongly of belief within our organization and at a personal level that IT will have a major role. You see, IT presently in education, in higher education, ICT or IT has been in Indian context is a struggle. But we strongly believe that once we overcome this struggle, it's going to be a major game changer. And this is where we would like the audience to reflect and in the subsequent discussions to address this. I saw some discussions on technology in the agenda, and I hope that would further be taken forward. One is that what does technology have? Let's focus. Let's say higher education and primary, secondary education being slightly dissimilar. Let's focus on higher education, where we feel that there is a higher role for the ICT. We first talk about the administration or institute administration. What role would IT have, play? They spend billions of dollars or billions of rupees. Higher education spends. The efficiency can go up vastly simply by bringing in an ERP into the system. We can have a lot more transparency. We can have a lot more efficiency in administration, and we can have a lot more interconnectedness in our spend. All modules can talk to each other, and universities can run very well if ERP can be introduced. I'll tell you what happens in public sector. Public sector, the DPE, which is the equivalent of, let's say, not equivalent, UGC is also a funding body, but some kind of regulatory framework that it has. It mandates the PSUs to have more ERPs. So can we have some kind of mandate without government having been, directly to spend money, that we have at least ERP in most of the universities, so that our spend becomes more, accountable, more transparent. This is one area we should be reflecting on. Online admissions have started. Most of the bigger institutions have online admissions. Can we take it to all levels in higher education, so that we have a lot more transparent, a lot more timely, and a lot more efficient way of admitting students. Online examinations are something that we are all starting, and this is where we'll have to take. Another very important field I thought I'll share with you is digitization of records. We know of a university where, because of a flood, past 50 years, certificates got washed out. So I think it's very important that especially the older universities, as much as the new universities, digitize all their records, and that's where I think IT ICT will have a major role. This will also be some kind of a fraud preventing thing. It will also ease the user's experience. They can all be uploaded. MHRD has taken the right step in starting an initiative, but that's only going to be the prospective applications. Can we have the retrospective records being digitized? This is something I thought we should be deliberating, and we should be having an agenda on, and mandate should go out to the universities to implement. Now, coming back to teaching content, we have all heard of MOOCs, we have talked about SWAYAM, we have talked about NPTEL and things like that, and that has to really, in the Western experience, that has taken off, and a lot of legal framework has to be brought in, so that the courses covered under MOOCs are given due recognition, and at least in the credit transfer, these are recognized and MOOCs is taken forward. Virtual classrooms are another area, smart classrooms. These are two big game changers, we feel. Because you're not going to have as many quality teachers. I think the biggest challenge in India is quality of faculty. One is even quality, even quantity of faculty. The doctorates, the number of PhDs we produce, and then to top it out, the quality. If that's not going to happen, how can some of the top faculty beam their lectures to the places of lesser universities, where the students at least have access to these, and then they get into a blended learning mode, and some faculty is there, local faculty, who is able to explain and interface. So this is something I think which has got vast opportunity. Now some of you may think and probably feel that these are all going to have investment, but these are going to be one-time investment. Imagine the investment you are doing in hiring a quality faculty. One, it is difficult. Second is that to retain and to bear the recurring expenditure, the investment here can be comparable. Third issue that we are bringing into are the infrastructure. We require 100% Wi-Fi enabled campuses. We do not even have 10 to 20% high broadband Wi-Fi enabled campuses. I think this is going to be a major requirement, and this is what we're going to, we should be focusing on. Now, these are not going to come through government spend. Some PPP efforts have to come in, and some private initiative person is going to find value in this, and he's going to invest, and some content are going to get, also get loaded, and this is how this initiative is going to unfold. Computer labs and laptops, tablets, these are some of the things which are already on, and these are going to go further. What are the benefits? As I said, we are trying to both address access, and we are also trying to address equity. The beauty of ICT is that it addresses access, it also addresses equity. Who are going to benefit? One is that scalability. Your physical system, a university takes 7 years to come up. A university actually takes 50 years to come up. 7 years, the physical infrastructure, then the faculty, then the culture, then the whole ecosystem to fall into place really takes time. So that is where ICT and IT can go into create 5 universities out of 1 university in terms of access and scalability. We are also talking about on-demand e-learning, which are possible. As I talked about blended learning, that we said that it's very often it is said that pure IT learning is not sustainable. We entirely agree with that, and a lot of blended learning can take place. People are already going in for flipped classrooms, whereby you first upload the lectures on the site, and people study and they come, and you reverse the whole mechanism, and where students come prepared to the class. So targeted and decide. Most important, I would also like to address the equity part. We have the less privileged people, you have women, we have women who got married and want to get educated, and people who are in far off places who have no access, where infrastructure is poor. And we all know that 1/3 of our highways are 4-lane, and probably 2-lane highways. One single-lane highways are about 1/3. So that's the kind of, in rural areas, access we are looking at. So equity is going to get addressed by ICT. He doesn't have to move from his house, and he still can have some semblance of quality learning taking place. So quality teaching can be replicated. Then access, customized teaching, equity, lifelong learning made possible. International dimensions also can be covered through this equity. Suddenly the borders or the barriers break down, and then we can have quality teaching coming in. So as regards learning, quality of learning, quality of teaching can get replicated. As we said, we can have, instead of one IIM, we can have all the new IIMs and old IIMs. The old IIMs can mentor the new IIMs. The old IITs can mentor the new IITs. The old triple IITs, or even some of the IIMs can mentor the lesser business schools. So this can happen. The quality of teaching can be replicated. Suddenly collaborative learning becomes possible, collaborative teaching becomes possible. So it can be self-paced learning, we all know about it. Strongly facilitates research. Research is some area that we have lagged behind, and suddenly ICT becomes an enabler. We have huge access to databases, we have huge access to the data processing, computation ability, and suddenly it facilitates research. So as regards teaching, customized teaching, suddenly becomes this thing. We all know that the student asks a question and teacher is able to, at his own leisurely pace, address that. Teaching designed to match the needs of the industry is another very big thing. The biggest complaint that we get is that industry says that our needs and our what we get are not aligned. I was the other day in a city where there was a ITI. Which was just 10 kilometers from an industry hub. ITI produced something, industry hub required something, there was no match. I was on the other day in another city where I spoke to a vice chancellor. He said, I asked him, which all departments, it was just a state university, and he said, which all departments you place maximum people, do you have 100% placement? The VC shared with me that only except MBA and computers, he did not place, not even 25% in other this thing. And he spoke of certain departments where the placement record was abysmal. Take for instance, psychology did not place many people. Physics did not place many people. Then it just was a coincidence, but my next call was with the director of a medical college. And he said, I have a major problem in getting employable people. He said, I have advertised for a radiologist post for 5 times and I have not got. Then we said that there's a physics guy, there's a whole lot of physics guys not wanting, and there's a radiologist person not getting. Can there be a top-up course whereby a radiologist comes? And the second requirement he said was a coincidence. He said, I don't get clinical counselors. And then there was this university which says that I don't have market for a psychology student. He has, 40-50 psychology students getting, passed out. And then there was this person who does not get clinical counselors. We don't have industrial counselors. We have several others. People just basically were trained to listen to people. Is something we are not having. So can you run a few top-up courses? Can IT, ICT thing? And that is where we can have this credit rating and credit transfer also built into the system, so that the person sits at home and he gets his credit, provided he's learning his thing and examination quality is robust. So this is something I thought we will all be. So the faculty shortage, we all know about. 80 to 90% of the UGC spend, we keep on looking at UGC spend, goes into salaries. And yet we have in school system 7 lakh teachers vacancies. Now is it the solution to fill up these vacancies? Then the next thing would be the quality of learning and quality of teaching and several other things. So I think faculty shortage can also be greatly addressed through this IT this thing. So we know that both synchronous and asynchronous learning can happen, which means that it's not during the classroom that the learning happens and 40 minutes it gets over. You have no access to the teacher. It can be 24/7. And most importantly, it can address vocational needs that I spoke of, the industry alignment and several other vocational needs. Typically vocational needs, I was with the ILFS vocational, they are some of the pioneers in vocational thing. I was with them. Now when you buy a lathe machine, it's costly. When you buy a 3D computer system to teach lathe machine activity, it's affordable and it's scalable. So that is where ICT can play a major role, and we are looking at 4 lakh crore to be the investment. Can 1 lakh crore more investment come into ICT, not through government spend, not through paying, levying more taxes on the taxpayers, but through some PPP effort, whereby the government creates enabling, role, and this happens. The scalability happens. We have to do something transformational. It cannot be incremental. So benefits of ERP we have talked about. Indian scenario we have talked about. NPTEL, and there was a major effort by NKN, National Knowledge Network. It was Dr. Pitroda's brainchild, and we were supposed to link 500 universities. Many of the universities have been linked. The idea would be to put in a lot more content and to see that most of this learning which happens through that actually are recognized through degrees. Time to insist on classroom learning, and rather than insisting on classroom presence, focusing on the outcome, that what has learning happened irrespective of what medium the student has gone through. So way forward, as we said, are MOOCs, and we have a very successful example of Coursera, and several IITs, including Mumbai IIT and Calcutta, they are doing good work on this. And in future you will have lot more Indian states, state universities introducing Wi-Fi and other facilities, which are basically infrastructure enablers to take the agenda ahead. Implementation of e-governance system will be the key. I said that there should be, to start with, an ERP, so that the whole governance mechanism falls into place. I had a company called Education Consultants India Limited, which is the only public sector undertaking under Ministry of HRD. So we are kind of in a position which is slightly funny. Education is considered to be a social sector, not for profit, and under MHRD there are 21 autonomous bodies. So there we are. That's why I thought it's very apt that we were asked to speak on enterprise, because there we are, the only PSU which is meant for profit in a place where profit is considered a bad word, and then we have to operate and match both. And we feel that yes, profit is unless you grow wealth, you cannot distribute wealth. So I think we'll have to tread, but have to tread carefully, but surely in a sure manner, so that we create enough surpluses within the education system, or we create enabling ground whereby the private enterprise comes and supplements to the effort. Of course, needless to say, with outcome being addressed and quality being addressed. So what have you seen in technology form in EDSIL? That as practitioners, when we go, we see that we require more policy and direction. We require a lot more enabling ground. We have to say that if you have done a MOOCs course, okay, 1/3 of your graduation is over. You are working in an industry, or you are not working, or you are a housewife, or you are wherever you are. So those credit transfers and all that would have to come in a bigger way. We require more traction on that. It is the beginning has happened, but we require more traction on that. Infrastructure is a big challenge. We talk about digital divide. We talk about the rural areas not having broadband connectivity, network, data center, and all that. But then the smartphones are coming in as a game changer. I think this is really going to be a game changer, and a lot of content can go through the smartphone. The screens are bigger, and certainly I think this is going to think. As far as EDSIL is concerned, we found that IT, no doubt India is a leader, but IT ICT in education, in the domestic space, if you see the top 5 IT players in India, only one of them is available. We wish all 5 of them were there. We wish a lot more vibrancy was there in the domestic field in terms of IT and ICT. And this is where I think a lot more encouragement would have to come from government, and a lot more market would have to come, because the players that we have, thankfully, are the startups, and then the players are smaller volume players with limited capacity to scale up. When you are looking at thousands of state universities, central universities and private universities and colleges, you require scaling ability, which we have found to be limiting in view of lesser IT players being in this space. Cost and viability are another major issue. Presently, people look at capex and get discouraged to invest, saying that capex is very high. One is that in education we spend highest percentage of our spend on salaries, and then we have nothing left to spend on IT. And since we have nothing left to spend on IT, we require more salaries. So it's a trap. I think we have to get IT to be in place, so that we spend salaries prudently and we get a higher outcome from that. So cost and viability are another issue. That is where we